the Enterprise Digital Podcast with Ian Akershoek and Barclay Ray, navigating the ever-expanding service management maze.
Hello once again, it's the Enterprise Digital Podcast. Yes, we're back and looking forward to another really interesting discussion on the episode. We've had a few crazy ones over the last months, as all of them great, of course, and some really exciting stuff about what's new and what's happening. And we're going to continue with that today. I'm Barclay Ray, of course, and still am, and still am joined as ever by Ian Akershoek. Ian, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you very much. Very good. Yes.
It looks like we're both about to go into battle because we're wearing kind of army.
Yeah, we're wearing camouflage gear, which might be appropriate with the news at the moment.
We need somebody that's shiny and colourful and bright.
And loud and bright and colour. If only we knew a guest that could be loud and bright and colourful. Yeah.
Give us a song and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, before we do that, before we bring in our guest, it is traditional at this point that you normally will have brought some. I was going to say a bad word, but trivia along. Do you have some of that today, Ian?
I do. Yes, I do. I have some fantastic trivia. Yeah, I'm rather pleased with this, actually. You know how quite often our trivia converges on a mixture of innovation, maybe a bit of AI, maybe a bit of automation, science, nature, insects. Insects, right? Yeah. Quite often insects, mice or cockroaches. Wouldn't it be great if there was a remarkable innovation story that brought all of those together that came out in the last week? Oh, what an amazing story this is. So here we go. Just on March the 7th, a small company in San Francisco called Eon Systems quietly released a video online that you probably haven't seen, Barclay, but I recommend that you do, because it is demonstrating something quite remarkable. It's a video with a fruit fly in it. A fruit fly. You know those? Drosophilus.
I do, yeah. Fruit flies. Drosophili or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it's a video of one of those, but there's something remarkable about it. We talk a lot about AI at the moment and large language models and simulating the output from a brain. If only you could simulate what a real intelligence would deliver. Well, what has happened is quite remarkably, a simulated real brain has been created. A brain made up of every neuron by neuron, and synapse by synapse, with a simulated body. So it's the brain of a fruit fly with 127,400 neurons and 50 million synaptic connections, all accurately simulated, complete with a physics engine accurately simulating its body.
Well, you've used the word genuine way too much.
A bit too much. I think
that this is just all a fake. This is all fake news.
Well, all the other AI is fake, isn't it? All the other AI at the moment is fake because it's simulating intelligence. Mm-hmm. This, for the first time, is a real brain in digital. And I think it's great. That's really exciting. Whatever could come next.
Don't know. Something interesting, something exciting, something colourful, something musical, something all encapsulating. Bringing things together. I mean, just let me comment on your trivia there. We've had fungus that thinks, and we've had neurons made out of.
We've had computers made of neurons. That's right, but that's different. Yeah.
Okay. I'm all for steam-driven pumps and switches and things like that, and old-style engines.
You are the steampunk of the service management industry.
I am, absolutely. I'm sticking to the core. Okay, let's move on. That is fascinating, of course. I'm absolutely enthralled. And we'll look out for the outcome of that. that we do like we do with the other stuff. But let's move on. We have a great guest today, and let's bring him in.
Here he comes.
It's Rob Akershoek. Hey.
Hi, good day.
Hi, Rob.
And we said we needed somebody who was brightly coloured and positive and cheerful. Certainly unlike me. I'm never cheerful, and really brightly coloured. But Rob, how are you doing? Haven't seen you for a while.
Yeah, thank you, Barclay. Yeah, I'm doing very well. As in this market, there's always something to do, so you can enjoy yourself in the IT management world, I would say. Yeah.
You can, and you're wearing your IT for IT. Yeah, you have a variety of brightly coloured. I mean, you and Stuart Rands together at an event. That's a solar eclipse, isn't it, of some sort?
Yeah. Yeah, then you need some sunglasses, indeed. Yeah, purple ones, and it seems to work. Like wearing bright colors like this on an event where you present something, and then that works absolutely. Yeah.
I did actually do it. I did an interview with Stuart once when he was wearing a completely yellow suit, yellow shoes, yellow socks, and everything. And I spoke like this for a little while. But actually, yours isn't quite blinding me to the extent of his, so we'll leave it there. Rob, you've been around in the market doing all sorts of different things, and particularly in the sense of pulling different things together. I know that from lots of presentations and discussions that you've done over the years. But just for those that don't know you, just a little bit about where you've come from, what you've done, where you've been, that sort of thing.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I've been working in IT for a long time already. I would say it's difficult. I don't even want to say, but it's over 25 years, I guess. And I started
25. So I mean,
yeah,
it's nothing.
No.
Yeah.
All right. Well, and I started more from after my university studies. Started more in the development space at that point. So at Capgemini, I was working, and that was nice because he was working in a software engineering. We didn't call it software engineering. It was just development of. But it was like in that time, like almost agile development, like what we call 4th and 5th generation software engineering. Like you go to a customer and in week time you build a prototype of a business solution. And that was really nice. And later on, I moved into the IT management space. I'm not sure even how that happens, but I built some solutions for telcos at that point, mobile, telephone operator, telcos. And I started to work in the IT service management space with implementation of OpenView, service management systems, CMDBs, monitoring. And later on, I moved more to the DevOps space. It was not called DevOps initially, but later, let's say, doing the whole building, testing, deployment. And then I moved to, and when I was working at Shell, I had a nice opportunity to see all the different disciplines: risk, compliance, portfolio management. So during these years, I've been involved in many large organizations, helping them to optimize their, let's call it the IT delivery model, the operating model. And as you mentioned, Barclay, indeed combining different practices, such as DevOps, ITIL. Nowadays we have FinOps, and of course we still have project management, architecture with TOGAF. But how do you blend it all together, to optimize, the end-to-end flows and value for the customer?
Great. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for that. And we will do that. I think before we do that, we just need to stop for a small glass of dry sherry and an Empire biscuit. Yeah.
Or a banana. Fruit flies like bananas. Let's have a banana break.
Okay, we're refreshed. We've had our little dry sherry, and let's move on. Rob, let's cut to the quick in terms of we had that little bit of preamble there around about pulling lots of different things together, and I suppose one of the challenges, whatever we call it, whether we go in with any sort of predefined sense of we're here to do DevOps or ITIL or IT for IT, whatever it is, we shouldn't be starting from that position. But when you go into an organization and you say, right, what have you got? What can you tell me about your estate or your stuff? Is that a common sort of situation that you find yourself in, and how do you move that forward, if you like?
Yeah, basically, I think this is, if not the biggest challenge that any IT organization or digital organizations are facing today. It is basically a simple question that they cannot answer. And I hope that the audience, the listener, also asks the same question to its own organization. So basically the question is, can you provide me a reliable list of all the services and applications that run your business? Can you provide it with a single press on the button? Give me a reliable list of all the services. And the reality is that most organizations have different lists, but they don't have a good overview of all their digital products, services, and how that enables the business. It's really weird. That is not there. I would even say 80%, 90% of the organizations don't have that in control. And for me, that's not just administration. I would say that is the backbone for your IT organization. Knowing the services you deliver, or the applications, how you call them, your digital products, you need a single list, a single register of all these services and how they enable your business. Let's say linked to a business process. And it's really weird because it's so foundational. Managing cost, managing risk, generate value. And that's the key topic that I see of challenge that organizations have, that they don't have this solid backbone. I call it the backbone for IT. Yeah.
Do you think that's got worse? Because I mean, has it always been like that? Or, we've got much more complexity, much more spread of stuff now. Is it just more difficult to do that? Or have we never done it?
That's a good question. I think it's every time we never have been able to do it, but over time we see some more challenges. So one of them is, of course, we got more application services to manage. There are increasing number of them. There's also increasing rate of change. Change is like new, or microservices, and so there's new technologies. I recall, many years ago we talked about, let's say, the SaaS applications were appearing, and then after a few years, you probably recognize those discussions as well. Can you provide a list of all the SaaS applications we have in our company? And people could not create that list. It was not always documented in the CMDB. So they started in an Excel sheet. Oh, let's build that list of all my SaaS services. Now, we see the same over and over again now. Now AI services. Somebody asked me last week, can you provide that? We're going to make an inventory of all the current AI services we're using in our company because you don't have a good register of those. I said, what? You introduce new AI components in your company, you don't know where they are? No, because it's not managed and it's not governed. So talk about AI governance. And the funny thing is, every time we have a new technology stack coming, whether it's moving to the cloud, or microservices, suddenly you have no clue anymore. What do we have? Where is it running? Who owns it? And so it's a recurring topic, I would say.
Is it not? Isn't this something kind of fundamental to service management and IT? The idea of a catalogue of the things that IT offers to the rest of the business. Isn't that sort of the backbone, the spine of the whole concept of managing IT to deliver service? That you kind of need to reach that point where you can describe the products that your store sells. I mean, not selling, exactly, but you know what I mean, that they offer.
Yeah, I think you're right. This is the core, right? It starts with, or at least I'm not sure where it starts, but let's say it is the backbone, understanding the services, because it's so foundational. Basically 5 key questions. What application service do we have? Who owns them? What does it cost? Who's using it? And those kind of key questions. Now, we do have in the past, of course, discussion about service portfolio management, service catalog management, and those practices are there. But that is typically, and I know in the past I was involved with banks and we had to create a service catalog, but it was just outcome of a PDF generated nice glossy catalog, but that was not the same as I was talking about. That was more like your, kind of what do you publish to stakeholders, and it's not the same as governing, the life cycle of all the services. And so we do have...
So you're talking more about discovering everything that's being used rather than describing what we want them to use. This is about discovering what's actually out there. Right?
No, it's not this discovery. I would even say, what are the services we have? Let's start with, call them applications for now, that people recognize. Like typically an organization of any size, but typically larger organizations have hundreds of applications. When a typical bank have 2,000 applications, even a large governmental organization have 1,000 applications. So we talk about those type of volumes. When I was working at Shell, we had about 8,000 applications. So that's the volumes we're talking about. So a bank, let's say an average bank, has 2,000 applications. Now, there is a register available in most of those organizations, but it's not always well governed. Like who owns it? What is the lifecycle status? Who has access to these applications? And somehow we've never been able to create this as a good backbone. And I know why. I see many problems why that is existing, and I can explore that later. But it is partially because of the governance around that.
Yeah.
And you could argue that most organizations don't have this in their DNA to have this administration, because it is also dependent on where a life cycle of a service starts. Sometimes it starts with an idea and then it's developed, and then service management is coming at the end and say, oh, we still need to register that thingy in the CMDB or in another repository. And it's really funny how it's impossible for many organizations to even manage this and keep it up to date.
Because it keeps changing, right? Because you could get that list of 8,000 and the next day 50 of them have just changed.
Yeah.
The numbers are so big and the vendors are swapping the tools around and things are changing. At that scale, isn't that one of the challenges? They're just maintaining the accuracy of that.
No, it's not the scale for me. Because if you think about it, let's say you have 5,000 applications, mid-sized company. It's typically organized around domains. So if you have a domain like HR, you could say HR has 10 applications. They typically have multiple services. So you could argue if you divide them into domains, every domain owner, IT domain lead, manages 20 or 30 applications. So it should be possible, if you organize it well, that every domain lead with a domain architect can maintain it. So at Shell, we had about 300 portfolios with 8,000 applications. So you organize around it so it becomes manageable. And typically that's what's missing, that creating a logical structure of how my application should be organized around domains or portfolios. And nowadays with the digital, let's say, product thinking with tribes and arts or clusters, domains, typically you organize around a group of teams managing a group of products and services. Yeah. So in theory, it should be relatively simple to ask a tribe or a team, what are you managing? And can you maintain it in a single place? It's not, but that's not happening, of course, but because of different reasons. But that's where it starts, the structure of how do you organize the applications into, let's call them domains or portfolios. And that's where it's missing. Because if I ask, can you give me a list? I get those 500 applications. I get multiple lists. So they have lists, of course. But then there is the architecture team has a list of, let's say, 600. In the CMDB, I find 800. And the financial management team has only 200.
Yeah.
And the contract management has, let's say, also a lot of contracts and is not matched. And because it's just lists, it's not structured, it's not mapped to clear ownership.
It's not consistent. It's not managed consistently. The metadata is different in each.
Yeah,
they've got different things that they capture and so on. Yeah, I mean, I see it all the time. Can I ask you a devil's advocate question then? And with my grumpy hat on, which is that if that's the case, and I share your enthusiasm and desire to do this, because I think it is eminently sensible, and we'll come on to things about tools and stuff in a minute, because I think we should always be starting with this. But anyway, if that's the case, and hardly anybody, I would agree with you, has this in a consistent format. Companies, organizations are still working. You know, it's stuff is still going. Can I ask you the so what question? Why is that important that we don't have this working if it's not working anywhere and we don't really know that it is working well in many places? What are we missing by not having this?
Yeah, so you're right that typically IT seems to work a bit okay, right? Well, we don't even have it because we have fragment and some people do the best and it all links together. But I think now we are in maybe a time where, you know, the complexity increases, regulatory requirements increasing, like DORA Act, NIS2 compliance. We have more changes to manage, cost, carefully select where to invest and not. And now we are in a kind of a difficult situation where to invest in. So there's not a sufficient capacity, and it was never been, but somehow we got away with it. But now with this current complexity, I would say those organizations that handle this well, have this backbone in place, can be much more efficient, effective, because the reality is in most organizations, there's still a lot of friction. And the friction, I mean, understanding what's going on, what applications are important. If I have an application dependent on something else, what is going on, who I need to contact to find what is happening. There's a lot of friction, a lot of delays, and also information that is not readily available. Imagine you have this backbone, you know, these are the applications we have. This is which team is working on it, let's say the teams. And we know the dependencies, and we can easily find, because everything we do in IT is linked to that, let's say, application. There may be projects or epics nowadays. There may be changes, incidents, cost, contracts, licenses, access rights. They're all linked. Imagine those organizations, those 5% that can do this well, they are extremely more effective and efficient because they can manage risk and compliance much in a more simple fashion. And this example we gave with AI now, how, you know, it's surprisingly how many organizations are currently working on, oh, we need to control what AI service do we have. And so, yeah, that's weird. Why don't you have control on that? Yeah, because in different places people are starting to experiment with it. So there is no process in place to onboard a new service in a structured way, so we keep that register, that what is onboarded, who's using it, who's owning it. And that's, I think, the core. If we cover that very well, we are able also to faster onboard new things, because a lot of times onboarding of a new application takes a long time. And if imagine we have this register in place, but also the process onboarding something new, then you have gold. Then you can deliver new applications faster. We can retire things when they're not used anymore, invest in the right systems. Yeah.
Many of these things you're describing, Rob, I think, isn't this what software asset management gives us, though? Isn't this what the SAM tools and technologies out there provide? It's that we will discover what's being used. We will tell you the shadow IT tools. We'll tell you the shadow AI tools that you don't know that people are using out there. We'll tell you that the applications that are being purchased with credit cards. We'll let you know what's duplicated. We'll let you know what you don't need to be paying for anymore. That's my background a little bit in SAM. I mean, these are the conversations that we're having there.
Yeah. I've been working in different software asset management projects as well at Shell and Siemens and other organizations. But software asset management is not solving this. So what software asset management, in my perspective, is more the software engine, the software that you discover. Let's say all the software components, and that's typically more than even the applications. But I can discover Workday, yes, but or software that's been developed. I don't know what is the business application name or like I can discover SAP, but SAP, do you mean the software or do you actually mean the business solution for let's say the HR service? So I can find technologies, but I can assure you, if you find software installed on a server, it's not the same as my business solution, my service to the customer. And I think we need to, software asset management is good to have, but it's more like the software products and versions and technologies I buy with the licenses, but it's not the same as my, let's say, business application name with the ownership and the link to the business. But it's linked. It's absolutely linked, those two. But bottom up, you will not get this, total, let's say,
interesting
product.
It's interesting that you say bottom up, because I mean that's always a challenge I find. Because I tend to go in and try and do top down and get people together and say, right, what are the 10 or 20 or 30 big things? And then, it's clustering and reduction and all that sort of thing, and trying to get it onto one page. And there are some people who really struggle with that because they live in a very, very detailed and dispersed world, and, they only see part of that. But I think there is value in it. I think one of the challenges, though, is that you probably need to do top down and bottom up to find a way of coming together on stuff. Because if it's just top down, it kind of gets to a point where, well, what are we talking about here? And I mean, just anecdotally, the one thing, I mean, I've been involved in a few of these where people have been arguing about these things for years. They say, right, can you come in now? Because actually we've been talking about this for one of them was actually 6 years. we've been trying to do this for 6 years. We've been trying to create this catalog, and we've been arguing about different things. And there's some guy who comes in and he's a ITIL zealot, and then there's somebody who comes in who's a DevOps, and it's like, just okay, let's just lock the door, get some sandwiches and beer, and like we agree on it. What do you think are the sort of key things that you found that really work to influence, particularly large organizations, where you're dealing with so many different, as you say, domains and people and departments and so on? How do you pull that? How do you get it to work? To come together with that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's not a simple answer, by the way, but you can think about, you mentioned top down and bottom up, but maybe you can start with, let's say, understanding the business process. Let's start with that. Let's say it could be in HR department, you have a kind of processes, and you say, okay, how are these processes supported? What are the systems, applications that support it? I'm not talking about services yet, because as soon as I talk about a service, people starting to take the, let's say, the ITIL book and say, whoa, there's enabling value, blah, 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 blah. And that doesn't really help me. I said, no, let's simply say, we have a business application. Where do you, this process step, what is there a system and application below supporting that? So I plot those first, and you say, okay, this is your landscape. So what I try to build is landscapes first. And a landscape is difficult to discover. You can discover software on servers, but it's not a landscape. For example, the order to cash landscape, or the supply chain, or retailers have different domains. You say, let's build that landscape from a business process perspective. And then we see, okay, these are the 10 applications supporting your let's say, business process. And then you find out, oh, but these applications, there's also other applications that are supporting those. But it starts with that business perspective view to understand a bit, how does my, call it an end-to-end value stream looks like, and what are the key applications? And then we at least have a key application list, because that's typically for risk and compliance important as well. We have our business critical functions or processes, what are the applications or service below that. And then I can find out what are the software components that actually underpinning that, like say your software assets, the license and the contract. So I build that complete view from a business process to the application layer to the Ian, your software asset layer. What are the software products that I acquired, and the licenses and the contracts? So I build that stack. And then the next step, and that's typically good to do if you start from a process, right? And it doesn't cover everything, but let's say, and then you plot them to the owners, to the teams, and some vendors, like what are your key vendors in the landscape? Now, the problem is that where do you capture this information? Because a typical CMDB is not very handy to maintain this, right? There is no easy maintenance unless you ask a person, can you put it in? And that's where our technology problem, that's why I think we don't maintain this information very well, because we are equipped in IT with, let's say, legacy enterprise architecture systems where you can document, and you probably have seen those, like I would not call names, but it's very complex to maintain data there. The architects maintain it there, and the CMDB is maintained by, let's say, service management config. Have you ever tried, you have to try it yourself in your own organization, creating a new application in the CMDB, link it to a business process, link it to the technology services, link it to a team? It is almost impossible to do.
Yeah.
You have to be trained to do that. Yeah. And you can create an application, of course, but now I want to link it to a business process, all these steps. Now imagine, think about the steps, and if that is okay with you, like the onboarding of a new application. I create the application, I get a unique ID, identifier. It's my license plate to operate. And over time, somebody says, oh, but if we have a new application with the status planned, I need to do risk assessment, determine the CIA rating. Oh, I need to think about where this is going to run. Is it the cloud, SaaS? What contracts do I need? All those steps, they're not enabled by any tool. There's no tool in the market that I know of that really supports the end-to-end onboarding of a new application. Right? Really, that onboarding, right? From an idea to production. And during that life cycle, you add information to it. You create the application. Let's say it runs on Azure. Oh, then I need to order a subscription. I link it. Oh, I need to buy licenses. I linked it. Imagine in reality, what we do is we start with a portfolio management system where the idea is created. We put it in the CMDB. We have a contract management system. We have a risk management system. There's Confluence. There's SharePoint. And before we know it, we have all this information scattered around. And
that's your problem.
And I think, and if we have, imagine if we have a sort of onboarding process enabled from, let's say, onboarding a new application with all the steps you need to go through. Sometimes you need, for a bank, typically you need a cloud approval where you're going to run private on-premise or cloud, public cloud. If you imagine that you can do those steps, then you can basically coordinate that and maintain the information through its life cycle.
The maintenance of that information through its life cycle can be a real burden, though, can it not? I mean, you mentioned owners of different technologies and applications. So if somebody leaves the company and or their role changes, or they're given some different tasks, or they're on a project and they're no longer the owner of that particular product or application or service, how do you know that? How do you know that it's changed? How do you keep up with that? Because the more there are, the harder it is to maintain the data, and you can't do it manually. Surely you can't be there with a mouse changing values on a drop-down list.
I think you touched upon a nice one, and the reason why we cannot do that today is because we're very process-centric today. So we have, let's say, an instance process and a change process and config process and a project management process, but there is not really a process that says, okay, you are the product owner, no domain lead. You every week go to the list, you see your list of 20 applications, and you say, okay, check who owns it. There is no system that actually supports that end-to-end process very well. It's like, I have a process to onboard something new maybe once, and then a change process, but not the maintenance of, as I'm a product owner, I go to a portal and say, okay, these are your 2 products you maintain. I look at the risk, I look at the cost, I look at the licenses, I do a sign off if there's let's say, new licenses needed. It's very difficult today to do that.
To me, you're describing digital product portfolio management. So product managers running a portfolio of digital products, and they each got their little flock of digital products that they manage, and some new ones come in, and they're monitoring the success and usage of their products. And is that right? Is that kind of where you're heading with that? Because I get that from a product management perspective.
It is basically, if you think about, it's a product management discipline, right? And in this sense, like if you're a manufacturer, you have your product data management. What are the products? They're typically in domains or customer domains. You do product lifecycle management, and this is what you do with your applications. Or now we call it also in ITIL 5 digital products. So it links to the portfolio of your digital products, and it's very nice that now products is also mentioned, but for me, it's not in the name of a product and application service. It's that product management thinking. It's the governance of, and as I mentioned in the beginning, I can imagine if the foundation, what you need is kind of a business topology or something. Like we said, we have HR, we have finance, we have manufacturing, we have business domains. And for each business domain, they use specific processes and applications. Imagine we build a map. Start with the business domain mapping, which is just a business function map or business capability map. But you can also say my topology of my organization, like we have an HR tribe or domain. And within that domain, there is a domain lead, let's say an IT lead for that domain. There's a domain architect, and they should govern their set of applications. And if something new is entering in the organization, they need to define which domain will going to manage this. Now, you can imagine there's many projects out there today that starts an initiative, and they have not even a clue where this application is going to land. Who's going to, because they just have project budget. And that's one of the, it's not landed yet in the agile world. That's simpler, because then you say, oh, which tribe is going to manage this? But you will be amazed how often we have a project, and at the end of the project, people say, oh, okay, we need to, you're going to manage that in this domain, right? And that's, so we need to create domains with domain leads that manage that, as you said, product managers or product portfolios, because it links into budgeting.
Council at the moment where there's a challenge around that, because all the different areas, and there's about 30 different departments, they manage everything in the area, and they all work differently. They all have different things that they do, and it's very difficult to see how that would work. And I guess we're working towards something where we've got maybe a sort of small central control that is based around the change in the portfolio management part, and the rest is actually then devolved. But they conform to certain standards. But just that, and it's a very simple version of it that's hugely far away from where we are and what we can do, and to get to that. I mean, I think the thing for me with all of this is just about, it's got to be starting somewhere quite simple. For one, because that's all we can probably do initially, but two, in order to get people to understand and buy into it, because otherwise they go, well, we've got all this complexity, we've got all this stuff, and how can we integrate these? And before you know it, you've kind of lost. And I've been on plenty of those.
I'm also not asking for the 100%.
Sorry?
I'm not asking for the 100%, but let's say the 80%, right? Because probably you know that a lot of organizations are currently still always restructuring. And what you see now, if you imagine you're going to restructure your organization around those business domains. So with, like, let's just say supply chain or whatever it's called. And then you say, let's imagine we keep the application that is part of the supply chain, we keep it list there. And of course, there are generic applications, more generic functions. So we have those, let's say, core portfolios, customer facing, more the development, marketing, sales, all those things. Then it's easy to say who is the business owner for that domain and who is the IT lead for that domain. You could do that. So you have like a domain map. So, and then you plot the applications to the domains. So you have a single map and say, this is our governance model, because it's basically a governance model, right? Who owns it? And not the individual application, because as you mentioned, Ian, if somebody relieves the organization, that application is in the wild air. But no, it's linked to that domain, so that it's always a domain lead. It's not. It's right. Very weird that the HR lead is leaving and there's no new HR lead. So you have and the funny thing is, if you imagine you have that, and I'm not, it's about 80%, then you can also assess your current state. What are my current applications? What is my target state? Where should I invest in? What are the initiatives? What is end of life? And I start to become responsible for the life cycle of all these applications in my domain, looking at, and now, if often that ownership is not clear, the business doesn't care about life cycle management, so we have technology debt. Nobody maintains the full list because some people believe the architects are doing that. But I think it's good, it's doable to at least plot the key applications. And I'm not saying everything, because we also have smaller applications, but I'm not so concerned about that. But applications that really support my business. Start with those layers, a business process layer linking to the key applications. Yeah.
And that does lead us to that logical question, which is, for those listening that are getting excited by this and thinking, wow, Rob is talking absolute sense, this is brilliant. What should they look to do? What are their next steps? How do they move forward in this direction? What would be your advice there?
Yeah, so I think where to start, I think, is a good, let's say, question to ask yourself. So I think if you can define, let's say, the goal is, first of all, people need to understand, do we want a good solid backbone of all the services we have? And I guess most people say, yeah, that's good to have, because for risk, compliance, cost that is needed. And so where do we start? As I mentioned, maybe it's, first of all, you need to think about, where do you even maintain this, right? Because Excel and SharePoint is not an option. So you probably need to think about, is my SIEM to be the master? So we need to at least agree a master data source. And then maybe also define a onboarding process. So how do new services, new applications enter my organization? Now, let me give you an example how it typically happens. Somebody has an idea and it's approved by architecture, and then people create a contract with a vendor, they buy licenses, they even order infrastructure, or they move to the cloud, and then they get some budget. And there's no application ID generated yet. So why can somebody create a contract without an application? So what I typically do with customers, say, we start with basic policies. You cannot get a contract in place if the application or the service is not registered in the CMDB, because we use that as a check. You cannot order infrastructure. You don't get a server. You don't get a cloud subscription if the application ID is not registered in the CMDB. You don't get a budget or a project to do something if that system asset application is not registered. So you use it as a license plate. And every time you don't have a license plate, then you don't get a contract. You don't get budget. You don't get your infrastructure, because you need to make sure that people are aware of the policy. And I think risk and compliance can be a good driver, because you could say, from a risk and compliance perspective, we cannot just run software and components if we don't understand the solution that's running on it and who owns it. So and make that kind of a foundation in your DNA. Yeah, that we.
I like the license plate concept particularly. You've mentioned that a few times. The license to be able to have this as a product in the organization. That's quite interesting. License management,
license to operate, right?
Yeah.
And the nice thing is that the license.
I've been hearing that quite a lot these days. License to, more to do with practices and so on. But I suppose it's also just about. I mean, if these things are going to be in place, they've got to be agile and slick and frictionless, because as soon as we say, "Oh, you must do this," and it's a long-winded process, then people are like, "Oh, well, we'll find a way around it."
Exactly.
So that's a challenge as well. You've got to be in there, ready to go with that as soon as you get some initial buy-in to say, "This is how we're going to do it."
Yeah. You by the way, you cover. If I can respond on that, you cover the most critical issue here, right? So when I was working at Shell, we solved that by saying if a new application needs to be onboarded, the portfolio manager or product owner can register that in 5 minutes in the CMDB, get an ID, puts his name on it, or her name, link it to the domain, so we know where does it fit, and you have your license plate. Now, after that, contract manager can say, "Oh yeah, you have something." Then you can also see, "Oh, but the risk assessment is not done yet because the CIA rating is missing." So it could be then you have other policies. For example, risk management wants to know for this application, if you want to put it into let's say a public cloud, I want to know data privacy. So you still need to fill in that field, but it starts to work out as a sort of single place to go. You say, "Hey, data privacy assessment not be done. Can you please do that? Because then we can continue." And then somebody fills that in, provide the evidence, but it's very simple, lightweight, and it should be done, as you mentioned, Barclay, because that's exactly what you say. It should be so simple, so it's single place to go to, because otherwise, if you have to mail somebody, "Can you update it?" It will not happen. It should be almost like for the person that does it needs to be able to do it him or herself, being the portfolio manager or the product owner or the architect, let's say. But you're right, it needs to be so simple to do.
Yeah.
But you also need a kind of a clever structure. It's to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that the tools that we are currently using, particularly the service management tools, are they the place for this? Are they the repository, or do we need? I mean, you were saying earlier we don't have tools for this.
Yeah.
We
not
use
standard.
CMDB and so on, but I mean, other areas where we could look at to get better guide for this.
Yeah, there are a few things in the market now. So the CMDB typically is not really suited for this unless you create a kind of a form on a portal where people can reach. So that happens typically in the ITSM. They can create a form to create a new application, but then you need to maintain it. In the past, you had application portfolio management tools, APM, but that's application. But for me, an application often is your system, your service, your record. But nowadays, you have some architecture tools that are really data driven, like really instead of drawing pictures, you have like really a data form you fill in. And so some of those tools nowadays could do the job. And some of the service management platforms also have those EA and application portfolio management modules. Key challenge still is, applications, services, what is the difference? Because most of the organizations have an application portfolio module, which is not always the same as your services, but often they are linked. I'm not sure what your experience is, but my experience is that often you have a service, like we have an HR service and has 3 applications below. That's almost like a grouping. Some people have said, no, application service is one-on-one. We have a service record with an SLA and there's one application associated with it. So different models, but that you need to fix.
The bundle is the challenge, because the bundle also can include other things, can't it? I mean, in terms of the delivery of service.
Relationships.
Correct.
Like communication tool or, mail.
Bundling. The bundling is very dangerous, because you could say, I have an application, I call it the CRM system, and actually there is different technology below that, and I just create one record, and I can everything I can put under that single record, the budget, the contract. So because I have that license, but actually it's not correct. It's different technologies, probably different applications, but we just registered as one. And I know a customer that says, I want to reduce the number of applications. Now we have 1,000 and 800. Now, within a few months, we had 800 applications because people were removing, combining things and not entering new ones because, it's actually the same application. It's the same functionality. We put it under one license plate. The number is not important because it's really what is the value, the unit that you use that for, the unit of ownership, the value, the unit of cost. And if you allow me another topic, identity and access management. A customer wants access to an application. So that's why you need a register of the applications. You link it to the identity management system. Typically, they talk about groups there or other. They need to be tightly linked. So I can run a report and say, who has access to my application? Now, I can challenge any listener that's listened to the podcast now and say, go to your own organization, create a list of who has access to what system according to the identity management system, and plot it to the application portfolio. Have fun for 2 weeks because it will not map. Of course, they have the same name sometimes, but that's not the same as mapping it.
Okay, good stuff, great stuff, Rob. As ever, thank you very much for that. I need another glass of sherry after that.
Very short pause.
Or two, yeah.
Right, we've talked around a number of huge and of macro and micro issues there. Lots of stuff to think about, and I think it's really, really relevant. Again, it's a problem that I've tried to deal with in many ways myself over the years, and there's no simple answer, as you said at the start. I think
Excel is the answer, right? Have a good.
Absolutely, yes. Well, I mean, I always start with okay, because we can't put it into the system because the system's geared to do something else. But anyway, thank you for that, Rob. Ian usually finishes off with asking maybe an old or slightly left field question that we can go on. I will bar Ian from asking you a question about your jacket.
That's right. I'm not asking you a question about your jacket or your tailor, or indeed your favourite colour. But I'm going to connect to the trivia at the beginning, which was around fruit flies like a banana. So I'm going to ask you, what's your favourite fruit, Rob?
I think it's how do you call those smaller orange? Mandarijn is in Dutch.
Clementine.
Clementine. It's
we have satsumas. We have mandarins. We have
mandarins. That would be a mandarin in English. Then the small, like a smaller orange. Huh?
Yeah, orange.
It's great, and it smells nice. But if you open it up with your hands.
Yeah, and that goes with the color of your jacket. So
exactly.
Nailed it. Very good.
But the nice thing is that it smells so nice. But when you open it up,
they do. They absolutely do. How do people get hold of you, Rob?
They can find me on LinkedIn, and they can contact me, and I'm happy to give them information and contact. It would be nice. And I have a YouTube channel where people can also subscribe, finding this kind of information as well. So if they search for my name, it's easy to find.
Excellent. That's good. Hopefully people will. If you give us the link, we'll link to one of your musical homilies.
There's a song on YouTube about a CMDB. I've heard about
I will.
Which are always very creative and entertaining and informative, I have to say.
Oh yeah.
So that's
Thank
great.
You.
Hopefully we'll see you at some of the shows over the year. Are you coming to the UK at all in the next while?
No, I still have to plan something. Maybe so ITSMF event I will come as well, and some other events I still have to. Next week or in a few weeks' time I go to Vienna for the presentation there.
That's a good show, the one in Vienna. Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us. We've run out of time, but that was a really good discussion, and so thank you for joining us on the podcast. And we'll see you soon. Ian, thank you again, and we'll see you all soon on the Enterprise Digital Podcast.